That's fucking awful. Like.
It is, isn't it? Right, okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first of many podcasts. MotorMouth, presented by MotorHouse, in association with Mr. Joe Clark over here. We're going to be speaking about a lot of things: live music, recording techniques, current affairs in the music industry. That makes no sense.
Not personal ones.
Not personal ones.
No, not personal.
But yeah, so tune in if you want to listen to just a load of nonsense, basically. I mean, if you're into music, great. If you're not into music,
even better.
Joe's here. He doesn't have a clue about music. He's the
well.
You know, he's going to just sit on the fence and listen. We've also got Mr. Jack Wade on my right hand side now.
Hello.
He was here, getting nice and close up to that mic there.
I just hope I don't sound clacky.
Clacky. When you speak, Joe, hey, you're more like a, hello there, my name is Joe Clark.
No, I don't think I think I sometimes hear my voice and I think that's quite effeminate.
But in the like inside of your own skull,
it sounds I sound fucking rock hard.
You sound solid.
It's
nice and deep. It is weird though when you hear your own voice played back. That's one of the main things that I was quite skeptical about doing this podcast.
What, just hearing your own voice?
Just hearing my own voice, because I hate it. Because really? Well,
you love the sound of your own voice, John.
No, well, everyone thinks that I like the sound of my own voice because I talk quite a bit. But when I hear it back, if I've done like radio interviews or whatever, I go like, "Oh, is that actually how I sound?" And it doesn't help that every time I'm on, me nana always tunes in. She's like, I heard you on the radio. She was like, you need to start talking properly because you never talk properly. And to me, it's just kind of like, I'm like, well, Nana, that's who I am. Do you know what I mean? I'm not going to like, even now I'm probably making a conscious effort to try and sound less.
Has anyone been counting Jordan's likes yet? Jordan's likes.
Like what?
Like less Mackham. I said Mackham and like at the same time. It came out as Mike, and I've got a big mic in front of me face now as well.
Right, so we're going to get to know the MotorHouse guys a little bit more. As you well know, my name is Joe. I'll be acting as producer for this podcast, and I will be the layman.
Moderator.
Moderator. All round, just a good guy. Nice, handsome, tall. Master. Right.
Master, I think that's what you...
Master of ceremonies.
Yeah, that's it.
The MA of ceremonies.
The new title.
George, what's your title? Have you got any official titles from universities?
Just like a Bachelor of Arts or something. It's just
Bachelor.
The Bachelor, the
Right.
Master. What have you got, Jack? BTEC National Diploma.
BTEC National Diploma.
Jack Wade, National Diploma.
Yes. Oh, shit. Started me head. Right. So yeah, we'll just get to know the guy. Right. So yeah, we're sat in the mission control room.
Yep.
Of MotorHouse. Recently renovated. 6 month white. 6 month
dark blue.
Dark blue.
No, it's
it was IKEA for a little bit.
we thought it would be a good idea.
It was. We painted it blue and decided to put a big yellow stripe right round the room.
Just start wearing like stripy uniform.
All of the truncheon which the plugs are plugged into. We're like, ooh. We're like, wouldn't that look really, really cool if it looked like wood? And we'll make it look like a 70s studio. And instead of like going for like a wood colour, we're painting it yellow. But it was the IKEA yellow, really. And the walls were navy.
Because IKEA yellow's the same as the mustard, isn't it?
But it's
that kind of like pasty.
It was awful. And then we decided to paint it brown.
So can we just clarify, you've painted plastic trunking with brown. What kind of paint, Jordan?
It was like matte brown.
And that's no wood effect, no attempt at wood effect, no knots, no nothing.
Well, I thought if we run some streaks, like a piece of wood, so it would look like.
Only to 6 months later be like, I want a white like.
So yeah, it's back to being brilliant white again.
But lads, honestly, you've done an absolutely class job in here. Like,
oh, cheers, man.
It looks absolutely brilliant. It's super light as well, because formerly, I think Jordan and Jack were saying that there was photographer in here who'd put some sort of filter
film
on the windows, so it was a bit dingy because of that anyway.
Our good friend Andy Martin, he used to have this is his photography room, and it was always nice and bright when I came in years ago.
Did he just have it like white other than the
other than like the artwork on the wall? And when we came in, I don't know why, I think it's because we didn't have anything on the wall. We thought, we're going to have to paint it a colour, but really it was just sort of, it's all about just accessorising. I mean, there's a huge Victorian window behind the control desk as well, because it used to be a Victorian school.
Yes.
I think it was originally a church, and then it was a school in the late 1800s up until the 1950s.
I mean, you would never know this is in here, especially the condition, I think, because I think you were saying it was actually adapted for like call centres and stuff, hence all of the trunking and all of the ports and things like that up here. Mm-hmm. And to stand outside, you've got the big wrought iron gate, you've got this big stone building.
Well, if you
just outside of the centre of town, go on, Jack.
If you look above the suspended ceiling, there's
another 10-foot void. And you can see all
it's
the
like
old
untouched,
archways.
isn't it? It's still all the like old stone archways and stuff just above the ceiling. It's class, like.
Which is a shame because we've just got this like suspended ceiling above our heads, and it would be nice to use it, but also it wouldn't be great for acoustics.
That's the next project, George. Upstairs.
We've got an upstairs. Oh, imagine putting another floor in.
Spiral staircase in the corner.
Oh, that'd be
lift.
Good, wouldn't it?
You should just get like an industrial lift.
I think we could
save his
in.
in.
We are also on the first floor as well, and all of the bands that come in. It also doesn't help as well, like me and Jack, when we finish doing gigs with our band, especially when you've had a few tinnies, before, during and after the show, and then you've got to load all of the gear up the stairs. It's like the worst thing in the world, like carrying...
So, do you want to explain like the situation in terms of the floor and how you share the space and what the original idea was for that?
Yeah, I mean, so our studio and who else is in the building?
Yeah, just kind of like how you have sort of come to the operation like as is. So obviously you started off with your own small space in here, having rented from somewhere else, from someone else.
Yeah, I mean,
who owned the building.
I originally had the space under a different name, and it was really small, more of a production suite rather than being a full-size studio with a big live room. And then basically the guy who had the building was giving up the lease, and then me and a couple of guys who have a film studio in the same building decided to take the lease on. And then I asked Jack if he would be interested in going into business and extending the studio, because I mentioned I'll be in the pub as always.
Every good idea.
And I just said I was like,
bad idea.
Yeah.
I just kind of said like, I really want to extend the studio, but the way I wanted to do it, like, it didn't feel like I could do it by myself because of the ideas I had. And Jack just kind of went, I'll do it where you like. But I knew, because me and Jack have known each other for years and years, and the Jack's experience and his skills that he's got, I was like, well, there couldn't be a better person to do it with.
Thanks, George.
The B Tech.
The B Tech.
But I think it is obviously like, we knocked like 4 walls down next door just to make the space a bit bigger.
Because I felt for over like 12 months when I come and visit, it felt like another room had been had been severed in half or had a partition taken away. It just felt like you were ever expanding. Mm-hmm. Like every time I came in, I think it had changed like once every 2 months.
I think it was all just trial and error, basically. I mean, at one point the control room was like open plan next door, and we didn't have the room that
semi-wall in between it.
Because that's the last I remember it coming in before as is now, and you just haven't changed for a little while.
Yeah,
I think we're pretty happy with
it's a good setup.
The layout of the studio and the setup. Obviously, would like loads more gear, but
I mean the room that we're in now, which is the control room. Before we actually moved in here, there was an artist which was using it for just kind of like store paintings. And when he left during like the pandemic, I just on a whim, typical thing that me and Jack do, go, should we just tap next door in as well? And rather than kind of just joking about it and pushing it aside, we actually went, should we just do it? And I think like
I think actually what had originally happened is after one of these gigs that we've talked about where we came upstairs with like loads of gear and we'd had like loads of bevs, we like just put all the gear in the storeroom. Because this wasn't our room, so we just filled it with loads of gear.
We just used this.
And obviously it's the
point,
first room at the top of the stairs as well.
Because it was this is the first room at the top of the stairs, so we just unintentionally occupied that room.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was full of our gear anyway, so we were like, we'll have to rent that room as well, like, and knock a window in.
The window really helps as well to see into the other room.
Yeah, especially now that we've moved the desk miles away from it.
So when we're recording, you can't actually say, no, that's like, but...
No, but I think the idea is that you were kind of gearing this a little bit more towards the bands coming in.
Well,
so they can interact with what's going on here while they're kind of chilling. Because, like, I'm sure people have seen photographs and stuff like that, but we'll try and post out a little bit more in terms of the floor plan. But there's kind of like an L-shaped seating area with some equipment around it, sort of space to like hang out for people who aren't in there recording or whatever. And then the control unit is next to the window, like actual big Victorian window, not the window to the studio. So you've obviously adapted it so this is more for people who are recording to engage with next door. Was that kind of like the end? Like,
I suppose this has become a multifunctional space now for bands to...
Especially with like fridge and whiteboard and telly and...
If we can post like an example of the floor plan that the room used to be like, it's ridiculous that we ever thought that was a good idea. Like,
it was just like there was so much dead space. But we obviously what really did help was during the pandemic we still are doing the odd one, but like running quite a lot of live streams in the live room, and having the desk where it was in front of the live room window was really helpful because we were watching the bands through the window. It would help that we weren't in the same room because of social distancing.
Yeah.
And obviously we could do the sound while watching the band at the same time. So it did have its benefits, but I think it was quite pointless from a practical point of view of recording. So it's definitely like it's in the best place now. And
I mean, in all fairness, you could have the control desk where it was, but by effect, it would have a knock-on effect of everything else. Like, this is literally the best you could possibly... I mean, to look at the control... I'm facing the control desk now, and it's literally slots in there so perfectly. It's an absolute no-brainer, really, the setup that you've got now. Aside from the fact that you can't see, and is that big an issue?
No.
Not really. I mean, you could set up a camera if you want and just have another monitor to be able to see inside if you
I mean, musicians, sometimes they're not the most attractive people in the world anyway.
No, I'm looking at one.
Ah.
No, you're Jack, you've got it. In terms of like actually meeting each other, where did this all start in terms of, was it through education, like music studying, or was it through just kind of playing in bands? Or
the first day I met Jack, I was recording. You were doing
I was doing an audition, wasn't it?
Yeah, for LIPA.
What does LIPA stand for?
Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts.
Right.
But I sacked that off to be in a club band.
The dream, I say.
No, I met John. John was recording an audition I was doing. I think Tony Wilson, the music lecturer, he put us together.
I thought you meant like Factory Records, Tony Wilson.
Oh, there's a few Tony Wilsons, isn't there? Yeah, I mean, well, I just remember because at the time I'll have been about 19 and Jack was probably like 16, 17, and I just remember he was just this kind of like, because like Jack, when he was younger, I was quite similar as well. When we were younger, we looked really, really young. Like, and I didn't have facial hair or anything. Like, and Jack was in the live room, and I was like, "Oh, who's this young lad?" I thought he'd like came in from school or something. I didn't realise he was actually studying there, and he had this like mad drum kit set up with like loads of class mics on it that he brought in because he's like always had all of his own gear as well. And I was just sitting behind the desk and engineered the session, and he was doing "Let Me Entertain You" by Robbie Williams and Mustang Sally, like two really contrasting tunes, and I was like, "Oh, the amount of." Especially when you're going through like college and you do like national diplomas, the amount of crap that like you've got to play, like you kind of used to that, and I just thought he was going to be playing Mustang Sally, but just playing like the worst groove possible, like a bit like the way Joe Collins plays the drums from Vanderbilt,
stiff as a board.
really. And anyway, and he just like came in with this fill, and I remember I was actually sitting.
And who's Phil?
Phil,
Mitchell.
It wasn't Phil Mitchell.
Philip Schofield.
Oh.
Phil Schofield. Him.
Carry on.
Anyway, so Jack came in this field. I was actually engineering the session with a great guitarist called Adam Ironside. And we both just turned round and looked at each other. And we were like he can whack them drums but in a very tasteful way.
Elegant.
We're not just braying them. But and I just kind of I just thought, nah, way. And especially going through, like college and the experience of, I'm not slagging other musicians up, but you see what the standard of people who've just come through school and think it's a really good idea to do a music course.
Because they've picked up a guitar.
Do you know what I mean? And they're going like, oh, I'm going to be a guitarist, or I'm going to be a drummer. Do you know what I mean?
It's because it was the best lesson to fuck about in school, wasn't it? Music.
So obviously, Jack had been in a club band with his dad since he was like 12 or 13.
Which actually I want to ask you about in a bit. Anyway.
So at that time I was putting together a band of just songs that I'd written myself with a couple of lads who I went to college with, and I just thought, we were like 2 years above Jack, and we needed a drummer, and I just thought, Jack will never play, he's too good. That was the first thing that I thought, just because.
So had you formed, you obviously knew each other,
yeah, well, I mean, obviously, we just kind of we went to New York together because we played the drummer from our class had left the course or something like that.
Right.
So we didn't have a drummer, and we needed to do a gig at the Newcastle City Hall, and then we were flying over to New York the day after to do a gig in the NYU, which is the university in New York. And Jack was like, I'll play for you, and I'll come over there. And
so what was that for, the New York trip?
It was just our degree, wasn't it? Yeah.
I was going to say there's a lot of kind of, especially with creative stuff, you tend to get a lot of trips where it's you go and visit these people.
But at the time I was only on the BTEC at the time, so when I got the opportunity to go and play with a load of degree students in New York.
Did that validate to you? You're I'm clearly better than everyone else. Not in an arrogant way, but I imagine having that validation of being I'm obviously a skilled player.
Well, not that I was big-headed, but I went to college, and I think the whole reason most musicians go to college is because they want a job at the end of it in music. I joined college and I was already a professional musician, so I just went for the experience of playing with other musicians my age.
Playing every day, producing music every day.
Well, that's what I was doing every day anyway. And when I was at college, luckily, I only chose to go to Shiny Row because Tony Wilson was one of the lecturers there, who was a really close friend of my dad's through the club scene.
Right.
So I just went there because Tony gave us a bit of not leeways and let us get away with stuff, but if I explained listen, I can't come in on Friday because I was playing 4 or 5 nights a week around the country. So I just wanted to meet, the whole point of going to college was wanting to meet musicians my own age to join an originals band. And then
the irony is,
it happened because I met Jordan recording a session, and then Jordan was like, I've got loads of songs, do you want to play in a band? And I was like, right. So and then after that, I'd sort of I got what I wanted out of going to college, really. I already knew that I was validated enough to be a professional musician.
But I suppose youth, I suppose there's ambition and there's kind of a youthful confidence, but at the same time, as a musician, you hear this whole Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours, whatever. Mm-hmm. And you've put the hours in, but you're nowhere near that, and you're only a young lad, so there's got to be an element of although I suppose if you've been playing around much older adults, that kind of question yourself probably died quite early on, because you literally just gone around grafting.
I was getting paid for it, so as soon as you're getting paid for it, and I was being told I was good at something from a canny early age, and I was getting coin for it, so probably, in a sense, it probably wasn't the best thing. I probably thought I was better than I actually was at the time, and it wasn't until I've got to a bit older now, people have surpassed me now.
A lot of people experience that though. I think it's across creative industries, sporting industries. I played rugby when I was younger. There was a lad who just matured. He was built when he was 13-year-old. And then everybody caught up to him. Mm-hmm. And I imagine it's a similar thing in terms of practice. It's just whether or not people are willing to put the hours in. I think we were talking before about the fact that because you guys are so busy here, which is obviously great, but you hadn't picked up a pair of drumsticks for months.
I've never played a drum kit since Vanderbilt's last gig, which was November.
Well, we did a live session a few months ago. So you played.
but I was breaking it for that. Like, even before the live session, I was like, George, I've got to play a drum kit here. Like,
because that's what we were talking about, man. It was because like a friend of all of ours, Amy Holford, who what's her
Eva
YV. She's fantastic, isn't she, Jordan?
Yeah.
And actually, she's just released some new music, so go and check it out on Spotify as well. But I think
she asked
doing
me and
some
Jordan,
drum work or something?
Well, she asked me and Jordan to like session for her in a live video. But and like when she asked, I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be fine. That, man, it'll just be like 4/4. This song that should release should got some like jazz drummer, like some jazz session drummer from London to record it.
Because she works with some phenomenal musicians.
Yeah,
as well.
she's like banging to the scene, and then I get these stems back from this jazz drummer in London, and it's like, learn this. We're going to record you playing a video to it, and I hadn't picked a drumstick up in like a year.
I remember you being like, I'm gonna have to tap these sticks up. Like,
first
practice in years. Like,
and he's still the next day. Okay, when I was like, did you practice last night? He went, no.
So, in terms of after that New York trip and kind of what did you see yourselves doing? Because I've known Jordan for probably about 8 to 10 years just through mates, but obviously been like sort of closer mates over the last like 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. I know that obviously an ambition for a lot of people is to, you know, go into bands, hopefully get signed and that. And Jordan, like, you've been in a few bands that have done like reasonably well, but never kind of come to fruition, probably in a way that a lot of people might have anticipated. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're on the wave of on the crest of something at the minute with Vanderbilt. But where did you see yourself at that point when you guys kind of, you had been to New York, you had been in bands a bit, like, what was the ambition there?
To be in a club band.
Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, like, what actually happened? I'll backtrack a little bit, because me and Jack, when we were in New York, decided to form like an originals band. Because this is kind of going back to like the tunes that I'd written.
Because the college-based stuff will all, I'm assuming, a lot of the time.
A lot of it,
because like jazz band's like a big thing, isn't it? When you go into like colleges and stuff.
Not so much.
I thought in terms of like people having to kind of just go through playing hard.
In your typical American film, maybe, but.
Not like
Whiplash.
Not fucking Whiplash. No, but I mean in terms of like people having kind of.
Well, you just get put in different ensembles as different.
Yeah, I mean it was just kind of like, it was typical, like all the same really. You gone through playing, you know, bog standard tunes and I think I just kind of like, I had these tunes that I'd written and I was like, Jack, like, do you want to do this? And we're just kind of like, we played a few gigs for a few years. Played a few festivals. It was quite like
under this originals band.
Yes.
What was the band's name?
The Real Divina.
Because I remember that's when I remember seeing you for the first time, John. I think you might have played in the Little Room at Independent.
Oh right, yeah, it will have been. So obviously, you know, that band kind of like ran its course. It was quite like sort of poppy, soul sort of music, very inspired by like Northern soul with like and.
Well, that's always been kind of your thing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I've always loved that kind of stuff, like the jazzy chords, but really poppy tunes as well. And then the band kind of disbanded. Me and Jack still always did bits and pieces together. We had a room at the Bunker in Sunderland, and you know, we're kind of like we always like had spaces and messed about with tunes. And then Jack went to Hamburg for a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, I went. Not to do anything musical. I was a shipbuilder,
right,
in Hamburg. But actually, me and you were together the day I got the call.
I got the phone call. We were visiting a friend in Leeds. And he was like, "I've got to go to Hamburg and work on ships. I've just decided today this is a bit of a change in career." And I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh, because at the time I was in a function band,
right,
and it wasn't doing very well. And this is like one of the points where I was like, "Oh, am I going to be a musician anymore?" Like, sort of. Getting to the point where I need to get a job. Like, I'm not earning enough from being in a function band.
So your band had stopped at this point.
Yeah,
the Real Divina.
Me and Jordan were still just
petered out a little bit.
We were still friends. We still had like a studio space that were rented out, but would go and like we didn't have any particular projects we were working on. It was just really
just like jamming and sort of, you know, coming up with tunes,
like
and
catching
stuff.
time here and there, and just trying to.
And
so
then
go on, Jack. Sorry, you were saying.
So we went to Leeds to visit. One of our friends, he was studying down there, And then I just got a phone call. It was like I had the opportunity to go and build ships in a shipyard in Hamburg, and I ended up like
I love how he's moving from one shipbuilding community to another.
This was this was like after we'd drunk about 8 steins as well, like a Christmas beer festival. And
so I was like, I am leaving the function band. I'm going to Hamburg. I ended up being like living in Hamburg for like 3 months. I came home for a bit on my 21st birthday, and then went back. And then I was like, I do want a proper job. Like I want to do music again. And I think just around the time after that, Jordan got a phone call from the college we used to be at and was like, do you want to go to New York again?
Oh, yeah.
And Jordan was like, I can jack up. So like,
there was a spare space. Someone had dropped out for like medical reasons. And they were like, oh, does anyone know anyone that might come? And I just like 2 seconds, I just rang Jack. I was like, Jack, we're going to New York. Do you want to come? So
were you in Hamburg at this point?
No, I think I just got back.
I just imagine you dropping like a massive spanner and just being like, in a bit.
But at the
just like, get your Stars and Stripes shirt on. But George's like, mate, it's not for another 2 months. He's like, I'll stay, lads.
But at that time, I was working in a warehouse in Washington, not Washington, D.C., Washington...
God's own country.
The Wesh. But I was absolutely done in. I hated it. I couldn't stand it. It was like proper mind-numbingly boring
George
work.
at Asda?
Asda George. So I was like packing like knickers and tights and stuff, you know what I mean?
Packing them in his bag.
Just, walking around like a little horny teenager.
Rubbing up again.
And I was sick of it. Like, nothing against the people who were, they were all cool, but they just like I couldn't go and like talk about, the Beach Boys or like stuff that I was into. They were all just into footy and drinking booze and like.
We've all had mates who's done kind of those sorts of jobs, and that seems to be the overarching thing, isn't it? Like if you work in a warehouse or something like that, it's unfortunate because these people are working hard and they know what they are, they know what they're doing, they're getting money to come back home and feed the bands and that. But when you're someone like us, maybe at a younger age, and you're going, I'm gagging to just talk about music or films or telly.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just wondering. I was on top of creative stuff, and no one was really there, which is fair enough.
And unfortunately, when you want those creative conversations, when you stop having them, you stop becoming creative a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's
even though you can feel it building up inside you, like you haven't got that outlet.
Well, I remember having like I was meant to be doing a session. I was meant to be doing a session on. Well, I did do it on Six Music with Hyde and Beast.
This is Hyde and Beast.
This is like loads into the future from where we're at. But go on. John.
No, it's kind of like
this is like
but I'd been working with them and
lads. I tell you what, can't go for a piss.
Yeah, actually, I'll start that again because I went a bit too far in the future there.
Right. I've got me coffee. Joe's had his way. We're back.
I'm talking about me.
So last thing we were talking about is kind of.
Yeah, I was just saying. So the warehouse that I was working in, I remember asking for time off for something. It was definitely something on the BBC I was doing with the band, and I just thought, like I've got this opportunity to go and do something on the BBC, like with the band that I'm in.
So which band's this, Jordan?
Oh, I can't remember which one. It might have been a session with the original band, which I was talking about. What was in with Jack. It might have been too early for the Hyde and Beast stuff, but I remember just asking for time off, and they turned around and were like, "Nah, there's no holidays left," and I was like, "You're doing us, aren't you? Like you're gonna stop us?" I said, "I'll take it unpaid." No, we're gonna be too busy. You can't have the time off. And it was just total. I explained to them what it was for as well, and they just didn't care. And what really infuriated us was that Saturday, which they weren't going to give us off. Worst thing about it was they were letting everyone leave the shop floor for 90 minutes to go and watch the footy in the canteen.
No way.
And I was just like, so you're not giving me time off to go and play on the BBC with me band, but you're going to let like half of like every bloke who works there go and watch the football for 90 minutes and then let them come back to work. So I just booted off, and I said, I was like, look, if you didn't give us the time off, I'm just gonna stay off because you're letting them do that. And it was they had this thing called the people team where you could go to and talk about like your sort of rights with your job and stuff. And I just went and said, I was like, look, the day, like, they can't do that. And they were like, actually, you're right. But this was just kind of like one of the cool little old women who worked in the office who was like, you shouldn't be stopped from doing that. That's totally wrong. But it was just the managers were all like, nah, I'm not giving you the time off. You can't do that. And I just remember being like, that's it. So I went to the canteen on my dinner break that day when I'd asked for the holiday. And I just rang Jack. I was like, Jack, I was like, I know you're back from Hamburg and that now. This is, bearing in mind, we just got back from New York as well.
For the second time.
For the second time. This was like 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
And I just said, like, because I always like, I'm not into really playing covers and that. Just, it's not really what I enjoy doing. But I knew it was a good way of just like making money, but working with your mates and getting to travel. So I was like, should we form a club band? And Jack was like, aye. He was like, because you were kind of like, at the time you weren't gigging with your dad, but
I
you
was gigging in another function band.
You were kind of like just, there was a few drummers in that band and you were like taking turns, weren't you?
This function band was like a really successful function band that were like, we went and played at like the Gilgamesh in London, and it was like basically Jewish weddings. We were playing bar mitzvahs.
So you were like the go-to band.
Yeah, but I mean, this was like big money function band stuff. It was a 16-piece band we were playing in, but this band travelled with 3 drummers, and like each drummer would just take a turn at when they played and stuff, and like it was class. But like I just wanted the raucous club band, like 5 lads in a van. Like, do you know what I mean? So
because you could happily just stick to that and keep
so
money or whatever.
I put this idea to my dad, who at this time was like coming to the end of his career, and my dad was like, do you know what? Which is like mad that I had the opportunity to do that. My dad was like, he has all of me gear. So like I walked into it, I went from being in nothing to like a business owner with like a full business and reputation that had been like built of 25 years from me dad. I was just rang all my mates. I was like, fancy jumping in a van and going playing some tunes around the country, like.
So I literally, I mean, at the time I was working at the warehouse, but I also had another part-time job working at the Sunderland Empire. So I was working like all the, and I love West End shows and stuff. So it was class because I used to like get to sort of like show people at the seats and watch a show. But the money wasn't great doing that, but I was doing that and, work. And I was teaching at a college, like, part-time as well, like teaching guitar in an evening. And it was just too much. And I was like, it is. I'm going to just quit everything and see if this function band thing works. It was kind of scary because I remember my dad going, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do for money? And he was like, how do you know you're going to make money playing gigs? And I was like, well, no, it is. I was like, I'm not going to get like 40 and be like, I'm still working in a warehouse and I'm still, showing people where to sit at the Empire. There's no wrong with that, but I just kind of I want to know what it's like to go around the country with my mates in a van, like getting wrecked and playing gigs.
The thing is though, is like we were a really good band and we made loads of money.
Yeah,
doing it.
like
a lot of like bands who are like coming up making their own original stuff will do a side project like that just to form.
Well, that's what was good. I mean, obviously we like always have done like original stuff together anyway, but it was just kind of good that it got to like a Friday and we're like, where we're gone? It was like, oh, we're going to Cornwall. Where were the next day? Aberdeen. Oh no, do you know?
Definitely sounds like you need a different manager.
Oh, honestly, man, it was.
We were literally ping ponged all over the country.
The worst one we done an owners party, which is like a big event.
I didn't do this one.
It was like a big event for like everyone who owned a caravan at some caravan park, and it was in Dover.
Nice.
So our agent had put us in this caravan park playing this big event, and it was like good money, so I couldn't say no. But this event finished at 2:00 in the morning. The next day, we were booked to do a show in Berwick at 11 a.m. Right, so we got the gear down, got in the van at 2:00 in Dover, drove like 8 hours to Berwick, set the gear up and done a gig, knee kip, knee wash.
So you left at 2:00 in the morning, got there for 10 in the
Got there
morning,
for 10,
went on stage at 11 in the morning.
Set the gear up, went on stage for 11 o'clock in the morning. Got there, they were like, lads, need dressing room are out. So they put us in the gym. So like, we were just like chilling in some gym in Berwick, like waiting to go on stage at 11.
That's class.
But it was good money though.
Thankfully, I'd like taken time off or something at this point, so I didn't have to
Jordan
do
was
it.
never there, man.
I was always taking.
He's always the same.
Well, I ended up leaving the
doesn't
band.
like proper graft, Jordy.
Well, no, I ended up leaving the band because I was in like 3 other bands at the same time.
Yeah.
Slut.
I was Eva, who we mentioned earlier. I was like writing, touring and gigging with her. I was playing guitar and keyboards in Hide and Beast. And I was in Lilliput playing keys for Lilliput and writing and touring with them as well. So like, it just got to the point where I was just like, I was looking at my diary and I was going, I actually remember the day that I realised that I was like, this is getting too much. You and me went to like a rally
for Jeremy
Corbyn through Newcastle, and then went to see Stuart Lee on the night. And I was sitting having a pint before I met up with you in the town wall, and I was looking at my diary, and it was just like, walk-up band gigs, which is the cover band, and they were in on the weekends, and I was looking, I was like, for like 6 weeks off the trot, I was having to take at least one of those days off to either do a gig with Hide and Beast, Lilliput, or Eva. And I just remember we did this, like, this wasn't really like thingied by it, but me and Jack had to go on like a big tour of every Pontins in the UK in a week. And like, I didn't have to take any time off for that because a lot of it was during the week.
Right.
But I just looked and I was like, from next week I'm gonna have to take a Saturday off. Then the week after, and it wasn't like, because I was kind of gutted in a way because it was a good way for making money. And the other way I was making money at that time, I was also a music lecturer, so I was teaching Monday to Friday at a college. Jack was picking us up on a Friday. We're going away like all over the country till early hours of Sunday morning.
Especially the time that Jordan left. Jordan left like 2 weeks before like this function band. We went on, literally it was like a 3-month tour. In 3 months, it was like 60 dates in 3 months. In that time, I like slept in my own bed like 7 times. So it was like, but it was like these 3 months were guaranteed like loads of money. Like,
but I just said to Jack, I was like, I was good because I was thinking I can make loads of money by doing this, but the opportunities that I would have turned down to do the cover bands, like, I mean, Jack understood. He was like, I'm good that you're leaving, but I just felt bad because it was like I was ringing up every man and his dog that I knew who could play the guitar, and I was going like,
will you dep for us?
I was like, I know off the top of my head, I was going like, I was ringing these people. I was like, Dipper, can you do next Saturday? Chippy, can you do like next Sunday? But you can't do the Saturday and the Friday.
Yeah.
It was just getting to the point where and they were like, well, so I'm not going to work the full week. I'm just working one day. And then it was exhausting for me because a lot of the time they couldn't, it wasn't always the same depth. And then I was spending like half of my week them coming around my house and me having to show them how to play the set. And I was gutted. I mean, to be fair, I ended up going back and joined them again, like
to finish off. No, but I totally understand where Jordan's coming from, because even me, like at the time, it was stressful for me, like running a business as such and thinking like, I've got a reputation to uphold, and like Jordan's just sending these randomers in Jordan's place of like this show that was like fully rehearsed.
Yeah.
But since then, I've done the exact same thing, because like going from a covers band, there's this thing. It's not that like I've got nothing against anyone that plays covers, and like I've earned a load of money from doing it. But as soon as the opportunity arises to go and play a venue, playing your own stuff, it's like a no-brainer. Like
it has to be, really.
To go, even if you go and do it for like a lot of these gigs, playing your own stuff, you don't get any money from it, and you're doing the same amount of travel, and you're sitting in a van for the same amount of time as you would be in a function band. You're going down to Cornwall to play these gigs, but for no money. Because you'd much rather play your own songs for no money.
Oh, you'd drop everything, wouldn't you?
You get like you know, like the money you'll have to cover, like the van and the accommodation. Do you know what I mean? Like you scran as soon as that's covered, you kind of like we're not doing it at a loss, but we're just breaking even, really. But it's kind of like we're now thought like, well, obviously Jack ended up leaving the cover band as well a few years ago, but I think like now we've kind of got this point which is really nice, is that we can now both work in the music industry still, making a living from doing music, but like it's very creative because we get to produce other artists. We also like work together in an original band now, Vanderbilt. But and obviously like we rehearse in this space, which is really cool.
But before we get to like the studio and stuff, let's like backtrack and just think. So Jack's been in Hamburg. You've been in and out of the covers band and stuff. You've had your own original projects. You've been sort of like pissing about with daft little bits and bobs here and there. Jack, if anybody doesn't know, ran a pub up until
very recently.
So all the while he was managing this pub at the same time as trying to make money through music, trying to be in an originals band or anything like that. So he's keeping his finger in the industry, but at the same time he's got a day job. Jordan's been through God knows how many bands. He's working creatively alongside Amy with Lilliput on and off, Hyde and Beast, Martin Longstaff. So at what point did you think, well, I might as well put this money to good use that I've made? And where did this, like, at what point was the studio born from that?
The studio thing came from, as I say, I mentioned earlier, I was a music lecturer for like 3.5, 4 years. Like, not year, like academic years. And I was teaching a bit of everything, like music theory, practical stuff, but predominantly for the first few years it was music production and live sound.
Even just one-to-one lessons as well, weren't you?
I used to do like one-to-one, still do one-to-one lessons and you know, work in schools teaching guitar and piano. But I was doing a lot of studio work with like the students who, you know, were interested in live sound and music production. And I kind of like, I thought I was doing all these lectures and these seminars on recording techniques and, you know, engineers from back in the 60s all the way through to modern day. And it's something that I've always been really passionate about. And when I was a kid, probably from the age like 13, 14, I really got into recording. Always had a little home studio. And just in my spare time, like, you know, rather than going out and getting lashed on that when I was underage, I used to just sit and read about, you know, Brian Wilson and Phil Spector and stuff like that. And I think I got the age when I was about 24, 25. I started lecturing when I was like 23, 24. So probably 25, 26, and I was thinking, I'm teaching all these kids how to run a recording studio, and I've always wanted to run my own recording studio, and I'm telling them who are only like 16, 17 to go like, you know, this is what you need to do to run a recording studio. This is how you set one up. And I was going through like business plans of like how to run a recording studio. I was like, why don't I just do that myself? Do you know what I mean? I'm still only like 25. How do I go about this? And I remember I was just off for the summer in like 2016, and I just sort of did a bit of research on, you know, how to like run a recording studio. I'd been to loads of recording studios, like our friend Rob, who runs Whitewood Recording Studios in Liverpool, would recorded the Lilliput album there earlier that year. I just remember being in there and I was like, this gay is mint. And like,
because you said
so
Rob's
cool.
Studios just,
it's like,
do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
The equipment
like,
he's got's insane.
Like outboard gear, like vintage stuff as well. You just kind of, and I just really like envied that. I was like, that's his job. He gets to come to a recording studio every day and like record bands and produce people. So I just sort of looked into it, and I went for a few meetings with like business advisors, and there's a few places in Sunderland which will help you out and give you advice on, you know, where you could look for space. And basically, like, the woman who was kind of giving us advice, her husband was renting out spaces in this building where we are now.
Yeah.
And she's like, do you want to go and have a look at it? This is how much it is a month. And it was quite expensive, really.
Is this anti?
Yeah. So I was looking at the space, and it was like, for the small room, it was like $150 a month, and for the big room, it was $180. And I was like, do I just take on one room? Bearing in mind, I had like no clients. I'd produced freelance. I used to like record, take portable equipment to bands' rehearsal spaces, so they used to come around my flat, and I'd produce them, but never kind of enough to go, right, I'm going to just start having bands walk through the door. So I was like, do I just take the punt? So while I knew I was still working as a lecturer, I was like, well, I'll just take the space on and I'll just pay for the space using me wages as if I'm like paying rent for a flat.
Yeah.
And hopefully it'll pick up. And so anyway, to cut a long story short, like it got to the Christmas and there were the college that I worked at used to run an A-level alongside a BTEC National Diploma and a degree. And they changed the whole way the A-level was working and it became more classical. And it basically they took on no students, none of the students, because they were all like...
What, so just no students signed up to this course?
Yeah, basically because they were all contemporary musicians. They had no interest in, studying the classical side. And they ran the classical side for like a year with the existing A2 lot. And you could just tell they were just like, I didn't want to, talk about Tchaikovsky and Bach and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that's fair enough. So they ended up axing the A-level. They just cut it. So straight away, like, there was loads of hours being cut at the college. And I was only working through, like, the college's agency at the time. So obviously I was at the first I was in the firing line for, like, any hours to be cut.
Which is a shame because you've obviously worked for them for a good few years.
Yeah, but it was one of those things, and they were obviously aware as well that I'd started running a recording studio. Like, I'd started one up, and I knew I was working, my friend Helen was working there at the same time as an agency lecturer, and I just thought, well, they were divvying the hours out between us, and they were going, well, we'll give Helen some of these, and we'll give Jordan some of these, and I just thought, you know what it is, like, I've done it now, and I really enjoyed it, and it was great. But I thought, like, rather than just coming in for, like, a few days a week at odd hours, I just thought it'd be easy just if Helen had all of those hours. And I just focused on trying to get the recording studio off the ground. So that's what I did. And I just thought, right, well, I'll tell them I'm going to leave in, like, the January or whenever it was. And by that point, I've got no choice but to get the studio off the ground. So I was coming in. After I was finishing work, I was coming down to, like, paint the space by myself, fit it all out by myself. My uncle came down and helped us put, like, all the wood flooring down and build all of the acoustic panels. And it was, like, literally I was just having to use any spare time when I wasn't planning my lessons or teaching. I was having to come down and do that. But it was sort of like a labour of love anyway. Like, I was enjoying it because I could see this sort of studio coming together. So then I just kind of said to this, I'm still good mates with everyone at the college. There was no, like,
bad blood
and anything. It was just sort of like a natural progression. And
wasn't it though? Funny enough, one of your first sessions in here was the cover band.
Jack was like, oh well, if you're looking for some work, he was like, I need to, like,
do some promo.
So he was like, I just said, well, I'll just do it at, like, a reduced rate and just record. I mean, we were in here for, like, 3 or 4 days off the bat. Staying, I mean, I'm sure one day we stayed at, like, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It had to be done. It was ridiculous, the hours we were doing. We were working, like, 18-hour days and stuff just to get this, like, promo EP done for the covers band that Jack was doing.
Which never, ever got anywhere.
Nah, he was basically doing it to, like, they were going to print some CDs to sell just to kind of, like, even, like,
make some
extra money while they were away. So I remember doing that, and it was quite nice because I was like, oh, like, it went, like, full circle, like the the lads in the band. I got to see them all again. But yeah, so that's how I ended up forming the studio.
So at what point? Because obviously you've got your clients coming in, you've got kind of your day-to-days going really well in terms of the studio when you're by yourself. But at what point do you think I could probably reach out to somebody that would help me make this better than what it is?
I think it was like, well, I'd done it from 2016 through to 2019, I think, like, by myself.
It'll have been 2019 when you started.
2019.
I think so, yeah.
And I just kind of think it was just the day-to-day thing was I was getting bands in, but I felt like I wasn't pushing myself. Where I was thinking, we've got the space, and there's more that could be done here than just recording bands.
And you could have happily stayed what you were doing
I could have
before.
happily just kept on doing that. Do you know what I mean?
I think when Jordan originally asked me, I don't know, it's a bit of a blur to me, but I think it was more the video side of stuff, wasn't it? I think Jordan had all these ideas of like he wanted to shoot like live session videos for bands and stuff.
And Jack's always been really good at that.
Yeah.
When during this covers band, like I developed this passion for video and editing videos. So when I was traveling the country, I would make these vlogs. Every week I'd make a vlog and post it, and I got really into videoing. And then a lot happened in between that time, but I think in the pub again, Jordan was like, you're kind of good at videos. Like, I want to do videos at the studio. Would you be interested in like doing this video thing together? And then like 5 pints later, I was like, do you just want to run the recording studio with us? And I was like, I'll get you some money. and then like...
Because obviously when I'd first opened the studio, I had to spend like loads of money on gear.
Yeah.
And Jack was like, I'd never really thought of this, but Jack was like, well, to make it fair, he was like, why don't I just pay for half of the gear? So we've got a complete 50%. And I was like, all right.
So it's a proper 2-person investment now.
Yeah. And so now we own all of this gear together. And like, but what was good was when we first kind of, because obviously Jack had the pub and the function band in the past as well. Jack knew a lot about kind of like developing the business, and because I'd only ever ran the business for like a few years by myself, just as a sole trader.
And you've even admitted that obviously you had to go and get loads of advice initially.
Yeah, of course I didn't.
You were doing what you were doing just on the fly and learning as you went.
But Jack was like, well, why don't we? We've got like X amount of bands booked in. He was looking at my current bookings that I'd already like had, and he was like, well, as long as we're in like a financial situation where we can, you know, we're not worried about money. I had money aside anyway from jobs that I'd had on. Jack still had the pub. He was like, why don't we go like write these next 5 jobs? We're not going to take any money from it. We're just going to use to like make the studio better. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I hadn't really done in the past, because I was just like, whatever I'd made from recording bands was like my earnings. Yeah. And as long as the only thing I was doing was putting money aside for tax and stuff like that. And Jack was like, well, why not like that money that we've got in for these next few bands, stash that aside, you know, buy more acoustic paneling, buy some better lighting, do this, and like we'll treat the room a bit better and
just invest.
Yeah, just invest invested back into the studio.
Because essentially you were saying it as my pay coming in.
Yeah, of course I was.
Rather than like what can I do? Because it was consistent as well.
But so our first investment was right. 500 quid. We're going to make a vocal booth.
I didn't want to mention the vocal booth, like
the cupboard.
The cupboard. So we did. We made it absolutely class. We like treated it all properly. It was like this vocal booth, £500 worth of decoration and acoustic treatment and
materials.
And also, what's quite difficult with stuff like that is, obviously, I've been in there. Mm-hmm. To walk in, you wouldn't think there's £500 being spent. That's not George.
Not anymore.
It's not a derogatory thing.
Yeah.
But in the sense of that's the sort of thing where that's nobody's coming in gone, oh, you've decorated, blah, this looks class. You've got this new thing. It just looks like a black room. Mm-hmm. But they don't, like, it's one of those things where aesthetically you're not realising what's actually gone into this. Well, and then what happened, Jordan?
Well, basically, we entered a pandemic. No.
This isn't a good advert for the studio.
No, let's cut this bit out, probably,
Snip. So basically that brings us to now, really. So what do you think, Jordan?
Yeah.
Jordan Miller.
Yeah. Go on, Joe.
Be it on. What has Jack brought to MotorHouse Studio that you didn't have?
So much, like, I think like kind of like drive and energy. Like a lot of it's kind of like
he can drive.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful.
But in terms of like, well, I'll come up with an idea, and Jack will go, I would imagine just doing it this way. And I'm like, oh, actually, that makes more sense. You know what I mean? I think sometimes I'll come up with an idea, and it might be down the line, I'll look back and go like, I probably should have done that this way, whereas it's better now because if I've got an idea or something, Jack will just go, well, just date that way instead.
Or
And I'm like,
don't do it.
Or just don't do it. 'cause it's
Sometimes
just a
that's
stupid idea.
you need
And
somebody
obviously
to
Jack
say
comes
no.
up with loads of class ideas that I would never have thought of, do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just good, like...
I think it's just being like... Being a partnership, it's like holding each other accountable to ideas that you come up with. Because, I mean, Jordan comes up with loads of class ideas where, I mean, we're both doing like... I think everyone's a culprit of going to the pub and coming up with all these ideas.
And never doing them.
Where now me and Jordan go to the pub together, come up with all these ideas together, and then it means implementing them together. So like, it's
accountability is a massive thing for business. Like it's also communication. Luckily, you're both in the band together. You work together. I mean, it's a lot of people work together, don't socialize together, but you do. Like everybody's in one big kind of group of friends who are all creatively minded, whether or not it's actively creating or have an active involvement in, do you know what I mean? Like being interested in sort of like culture and stuff like that.
Well, it just goes back to like the thing Jordan was on about working in that environment where like you almost feel like when you're not being creative in the warehouse, for instance, and then
you feel like a bit of an outsider. Like
all of a sudden, me and Jordan are in this recording studio together, which half the time it doesn't even feel like we're working.
Yeah,
we're just but we spend all of our time now with creative people doing creative things.
Well, there's no real better place to work, really, is there, among creative people and doing creative things. I suppose that's working in a recording studio. That's exactly what you want, isn't it?
Oh, totally, man.
Right, well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up there. Jordan, that was a lovely little response. Right, I just want to thank everybody for listening. It's been really nice to sit and chat with Jordan and Jack from MotorHouse. The MotorMouth podcast will be back in some way, shape or form. We're not quite sure when, but very similar conversations being had with each other, just talking through industry stuff, production, just musically, just having a general crack on. Probably once every week, but we'll just see how it's going. So yeah, until then, thank you very much. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.